You can find all the deck lists in the video and more at the link in the description down below. Let's get started. Hey everyone, Optimus Tom here, and this week's recap video is going to be a little bit different than the ones that I normally do. Instead of recapping decks from this week's challenges, I'm going to be going over a handful of lists that I would play right now in Pioneer if I had an event, since I do. I'm going to be playing the Magic the Gathering Online Creator Showdown in just a couple of days. It's this weekend, and I figured I should share what I've been looking at to try to play in the event and try to win as many matches as possible. Now, as I mentioned in my last video, the showdown will be this Saturday, April 12th. It's starting at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and will be broadcast with full commentary on the Magic Online Twitch TV channel. Meanwhile, I will be streaming my own point of view from my games over on my Twitch channel, Optimus Tom TV over there. So I've got 2 days until deck submission, so let's dive right in and pick me a list. All right, so first up is a deck I'm going to get out of the way right now, since it's both one of the most popular as well as potentially just like the best deck overall in the format. And of course, I'm talking about Rakdos Demons. Yeah, I know it's not something fancy or special, but since I am playing an event that I want to try to win as many matches as possible, I do need to consider our highest chances for success. And Demons is both a deck that performs extremely well in the metagame, as well as aligning with like my preferred playstyle for deck, which is a black mid-range pile that can run away with games if you navigate your resources correctly, and of course has a lot of interaction and specifically hand disruption behind it. So we'll get into some spicier lists a little bit later on, but for now, a list like this one that won the challenge on Sunday night from Pilot Silkos 13 is where I'd probably go for a Rakdos Demons list, as the distribution of cards in this specific list matches where I want to be in a format full of expected red decks, and then also the decks that are gunning to beat them, like some of the control and combo based shells. Now, exile based removal like Torch the Tower and trading Bitter Triumph out for Go for the Throat to hedge against those aggro decks is what I would do if I'm expecting tons of red aggro, while cards like Kroxa in the main deck have been moved over to the sideboard to allow for some extra copies of main deck threats like Shieldred the Apocalypse, and then going up to a full 4 copies of Fear of Missing Out, which is not too strange, but gives us a bunch of big butted blockers and buffering for our life total while we're setting up our kind of game plan of Demons and Unholy Annex. Now, I'm also a fan of maxing out on Blazemire Verge and cutting down on a number of Sulphurous Springs to really save on our life total every now and then, while 2 copies of Duress in the main deck can also nab cards like Pesky Monstrous Rages from our aggressive opponents, as well as hitting problematic enchantments or planeswalkers from the decks that are looking to beat up on aggro at the same time. Likewise, sideboarding into 3 copies of Invoke Despair for the slower and grindier matchups has been something I've been enjoying a lot when I'm playing these Black X mid-range shells, and being able to sideboard into extra copies of your specifically good removal and disruption that isn't already 4-ofs in the main deck is an easy 1-for-1 sideboarding swap for a lot of these matchups. So the one thing I am considering trying out in this deck, after trying it out in decks in the space like Mardu Greasefang, is looking at the 2 copies of Hidetsugu Consumes All that are in the sideboard here, and potentially swapping them out for some copies of Anger of the Gods. Now, Anger has done decent work in some of the aggro matches, although it can be dodged if people save kind of singleton pump spells for the opposing turn, which can be kind of annoying. I had that happen to me as a Mardu Greasefang player, had the mouse at 2 toughness. They monstrous raged it on my turn, which gave them a Valiant +1/+1 counter and the roll token to make it live through the anger, which kind of stinks and is a feel bad moment. But the exiling clause and the fact that 3 damage is usually enough is awesome, especially because it gets rid of the dies trigger from a Heartfire hero, while the Hidetsugu Consumes All saga will make you take the damage since it just destroys it regardless of its power and toughness. Now, the plus side, of course, is that Hidetsugu Consumes All will take care of any and all tokens as well. So if you're running into like Greasefang, you declare up a bunch of angels, as well as exile the graveyard the next turn. This is kind of where you want to be. And like I said, doubles is the graveyard hate in that matchup there. So it's hard not to pick up this deck just for comfort and power. And Rakdos is going to be something that I am heavily considering for Saturday's games. Now, another deck that has been suggested to me, and I can kind of get behind the reasoning in this one, is Quintorius Combo. Like this list by Pilot Coco 7721, and something that my sometimes co-caster Matt Zhu has plenty of experience playing. Now, the Quintorius deck suffered a lot when Selesnya Company was seeing an uptick in play, as the taxing effects and Aven interrupters made the deck almost impossible to combo with, but now that that only has to get them with disruption and aggro, things are looking a tiny bit better. Now, I'll admit that this choice isn't something that I think is amazing in like the current space of the metagame, as traditionally combo decks can get pressured out by fast aggro and torn apart by a bunch of hand disruption, but the Quintorius deck has two things going for it that can make up for some ground in these areas of deficit. Now, the first is the fact that while normally the deck is handicapped into running expensive cards in order to consistently discover into its combo pieces, there have been a number of split and high converted mana cost cards with abilities that allow them to be discarded so that the deck can still take actions as early as turn 2. Now, this can both accelerate the deck as well as respond to your opponent's game plan in the form of things like removal spells. So Virtue of Persistence is a great one, as it can kill a Heartfire hero through most interactions, save for like a hexproof spell or 2 pump spells that have toughness in the row, like my previous Feels Bad beat story, while shutting off most of the damage from the dies trigger portion. Now, Trumpeting Carnosaur is another card that can be played later on for its ability to actually discover into our combo, but also works as a solid 3 mana removal spell for the early game. Oh, and did I mention that we're still a Leyline Binding Domain style deck? Quintorius Combo gets to sort of cheat on its removal package in just a couple of different axes that make it a decent choice even against an aggressive metagame. Now, on the flip side, cards like Spinewood's Armadillo and Herd Migration accelerate us towards our combo faster by allowing us to drop an extra land on the battlefield, giving our combo deck a faster closing speed than other types of decks in the same vein in the same space. Now, the other thing is that's actually tacked on to a lot of these examples already given, and that's the incidental life gain aspect of the deck. Virtue kills something and gains us life. Herd Migration ramps us and gains us life, which, until a Screaming Nemesis comes in and eats a Witchstalker's Frenzy, gives us extra turns and time to find our combo pieces in the face of aggressive strategies. Of course, all these combo pieces are going to be in our deck, save for the first one to start the chain, which does give us a little bit of time to draw into them or replace one against some hand disruption. Even our combo, speaking of that, with Quintorius can allow us to gain some life whenever we cast a spell from exile, so biding our time with like a Release to the Wind or something early on is a valid way to survive, just so we can live an extra turn and then combo the aggro player as well. Now, the real kicker to this deck is that it has begun sideboarding into an extreme amount of board wipe effects that really seal the deal against most creature-based strategies, while then just relying on the power of the combo or Herd Migration to edge out the decks that are fighting the aggro decks and such. 2 Path to Peril, even though we can discover into it, it gets played in the sideboard. 2 Languish and 3 Deadly Cover-Up can all come in to punish various levels of creature-based decks or exile things entirely from the game, the opponent's deck entirely from the game, while an additional copy of Harvester of Misery can be discarded as early removal or used as an 8th sweeper from the sideboard, giving everything on our opponent's side -2/-2 when we hardcast it. In a sort of similar vein of deck to the Quintorius Combo, the same friend that's been pressuring me to maybe try that deck, Wappa, has been a huge Lotus Field Combo merchant. Now, the traditional version of the deck, though, not the newer Artist Talent version. Now, there's close to 0% chance that I actually play this deck just due to the lack of practice time, but the strength of stock up in this deck can't be understated as a powerful digging and recovery card, even against a field that's sure to have plenty of Thoughtseize alongside aggressive decks. Anger of the Gods, 9 lives, temporary lockdown, and then, of course, your combo piece that wins the game, Approach of the Second Sun, are also all tools you can utilize against aggro at various points throughout a game. Although, casting Approach is usually a sign that you've had a game all locked up as is. Now, the deck also has Grand Abolisher and Silence it can grab from the sideboard to combo through most interactive decks, not to mention a couple of copies of Mystical Dispute in the sideboard as well, just to have some interaction of its own. Now, I'm not sold that I have enough time to dump into the deck to pilot it well enough to win in the event, but I won't discount it as an underplayed option in the Pioneer metagame that would probably be performing better if Pioneer had more paper events, because it's just very frustrating to have to go through on Magic the Gathering Online, hence why the approach of the second Sun version of the deck is something to consider for this online tournament. Niv to Light, with a similar list to this one that pilot Claudio put together a couple of weeks ago and won a challenge with, if I recall correctly, is another list that I am highly considering, as even though the deck has moved away from like Sylvan Caryatid early on to block because of the existence of cards like Nowhere to Run, which make that hexproof blocker no longer hexproof, the life gain from cards like Lightning Helix, and most importantly, Ancient Cornucopia is incredibly appealing to me. Now, the 5-color deck has historically had a good matchup against the other mid-range decks as well, and because of the way that Bring to Light functions in the deck, it's full of cards that you don't really want to have bounced back to your hand because you just get to cast them all over again. Of course, this is from your opponent's perspective. They don't want to bounce your Niv so you can get another Niv trigger against that. That, and having cards like Alenda, Saint of Dust, that can't even be targeted by cards like This Town Ain't Big Enough, is another reason why I'm highly considering this style of deck. Now, being both a Yorion and a toolbox deck means that it gets to run a bunch of different cards like Deafening Clarion, Maelstrom Pulse, Sunfall, Deadly Cover-Up, and Culling Ritual in varying amounts and configurations, allowing you to have an answer to pretty much whatever board state that you're going to encounter in the format. And of course, the deck still packs the incredibly powerful Bring to Light and Tibalt game plan, which, while it's not at its best against a swarm of mice, can still demolish other grindy mid-range decks and even some control shells that aren't prepared to counter the Bring to Light right away. Now, the deck has evolved to being an Up the Beanstalk deck as well, even though a lot of the cards it plays don't actually trigger the Beanstalk itself, but the main engine of the deck does, and if you cast 2 5-cost spells, you're just gonna draw 2 cards, so that's pretty solid. Now, the big reason to not just slam this deck and lock it in for Saturday is the fact that I think it's actually pretty weak to the other decks like in the list here that I am considering, aka the decks looking to target mono red or Rakdos specifically. Control and combo decks are either locking down your game plan or completely ignoring it and killing you before you can actually set things up for yourself. And being an 80-card deck full of one-ofs means that you're not always going to have the correct interaction to deal with those things when you really need to. Now, last but not least is probably the most Tom of all of these decks, which is mono black mid-range. Now, there's actually 2 separate lists that have performed very well recently, with Misplaced Ginger winning a challenge this weekend with a Demons take on the list, keeping in Unholy Annex and Blade of the Oni from the Rakdos version, while another one that I have been testing out by pilot Nubrala has top-aided a different challenge, playing Sign in Blood and 4 full copies of Gifted Aetherborn instead. Actually, that's in both of the lists, but while I haven't tried Misplaced Ginger's version yet, the more classic version with Sign in Blood also plays a singleton copy of Sorin the Mirthless and a total of 3 main deck Invoke Despairs, trading in Mutavault for Hive the Eye Tyrant as the creature land of choice as well. And not going to lie, this deck is doing things for me. Now, both versions of the deck are packing be somewhere between 4 and 6 main deck and up to 6 to 8 total sideboard 1 mana hand disruption type spells between Duress and Thoughtseize, while sideboarding 3 to 4 copies of Go Blank, giving the deck a game plan against slower decks like Control, in addition to the speed bumps it has on the ground in the form of Gifted Aetherborn to block things from the mice deck profitably, no matter the amount of trample damage or toughness that those things have. Now, Graveyard Trespasser does an unexpected amount of work in these lists as well, eating 2 cards to remove it and taking one of the creatures that we've killed with a Fatal Push or something earlier on and turning it into at least a point of life swing and damage. Now, Murderous Rider seems like a little bit of a counterintuitive inclusion since it actually deals damage to us when we use the Swift End side of things. We lose 2 life, but being able to have it be played as a life-linking blocker is a big upside, especially post-board wipe in some of our sideboard games. Now, Misplaced Ginger's version of the deck has the Clock of Unholy Annex and of course the Mutavault to turn it on consistently, and runs a bunch of the same creatures just in different types of quantities. Now, it trades in the Sign in Blood for Unholy Annex straight up. That's just card advantage for card advantage, and Unholy Annex becoming a 6/6 flying demon is just a huge plus side on the top of that, while we lose a singleton copy of Murderous Rider and our one of Sorin to play 2 copies of Blade of the Oni for an early demon to have on the board. Now, I'm eager to try out the demons flavor of the list, mostly because I think Ginger's sideboard options are also a lot more appealing to me, with Nowhere to Run over Ray of Enfeeblement and a copy of the Meathook Massacre, as well as 2 copies of Withering Torment for resolved enchantments that hit the battlefield. Now, I've actually yet to play against a red deck with any iteration of these mono black decks, although I'm only a few matches into my current league at the moment. All of the matches I've played, though, have been control decks looking to prey on the aggro decks, and instead they run into my discard Sorin Invoke Despair deck. Sorry, not sorry, everybody. So that's where my head's at for now in Pioneer. Now, I've still got a couple of days, like quite literally like 2 days to make up my mind, including a day of Pioneer coverage tomorrow on Tuesday, April 8th at Card Art. Take a look at some of the spicy things that people are cooking up with the new Tarkir Dragonstorm cards, which, to be fair, none of them have really seemed to make that big of a splash on people's radar quite yet and permeate into the being of Pioneer. So if you were in my shoes and had a Pioneer event coming up, what would you play? Let me know in the comments down below what you pick from this list, or suggest one of your own that I haven't really touched upon yet. And while you're down there, you can give the video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed seeing my deck selection thought process incarnate. And if you've enjoyed my videos as a whole, please consider becoming a member of my channel and supporting my content just like the individuals over here have. Now, 2 different tiers of support will give you different perks, including early access to all of my content, both in written and video form, and up to and including Discord access and personal deck techs. Then you can click join down below or over on my main channel page to get to showing your devotion. And as always, I'd love it if you could just tap that subscribe button, because then you'll stay up to date on the latest deck techs, metagame analysis, and just in general, Magic the Gathering content from me. See you live on Saturday.